It seems that Hans Niemann finds himself embroiled in controversy wherever he goes. Since the scandal last year in St. Louis when Magnus Carlsen accused him of cheating, he's been having a very busy time. Apart from that court case that was hanging over him and Carlsen, he has been going from tournament to tournament with successes, with failures. He's been playing in open tournaments, been playing all over the world with very little breaks, actually. It's very interesting to see. That's where he's obviously wanted to escape to, but it's great to see that he's managed to keep his head clear enough to keep playing. Anyway, the court case has been resolved and he's recently been readmitted to playing on chess.com. However, he played against Vladimir Kramnik, who accused him of cheating and chucked a game against him. He didn't want to play against Niemann. Incredible. It seems very unlikely that Niemann was cheating, considering the scrutiny that he's under. If you want to hear Kramnik's side of the story, then I recommend the C Squared podcast with Christian Chirilla and Fabiano Caruana, where Kramnik goes on at length about all the issues there. Anyway, yesterday Niemann and Kramnik played again, and this was to the play-in qualifier tournament for one of the online Champions Chess Tour events. So it's a 2-game match, 10 minutes for each side plus 2 seconds increment. Here is the first game. Kramnik with white. And actually, it's very interesting to see Kramnik playing again. I mean, he says he's retired. Well, he is, but I guess retired from just classical play, and he's dabbling with online events. So here's an interesting one. So Kramnik, well, Kramnik has played this kind of, slow reti in the past, but Niemann plays this knight c6 move, which is an interesting one because, of course, if bishop g2, then you can play e5, and that's actually very respectable for black with a reversed modern. So Kramnik plays, you could say, the recommended move against this, which is d4 to stop e5. So now it's a kind of Chigorin where white has played a very early g3, but this is reasonable for black. I mean, you can just play bishop g4 here. Bishop f5, as Niemann played, also very respectable. And e6, yeah, the problem is, white needs a pawn break. And black has pretty good control over here. Of course, c4 is possible at some point. But knight b4 is a clever move. I mean, this has been played before. So the very obvious kind of patzer threat of taking on c2. But the curious thing is, it's actually rather awkward for white to deal with this. You can play knight a3 to defend this pawn, but the knight is rather misplaced on a3. So Kramnik goes knight e1 after about 30 seconds thought. 34 seconds thought exactly, according to the details here. Yeah, it's a retreat, but it means the c-pawn isn't blocked. Knight f6, sensible development. c3, pushing the knight back. But, black is very well organised here, and it looks a bit funny to have the knight on e1. But bishop g5, and that breaks the pin, and knight d2. So what white is trying to do is exchange on f6 and then break with e4, and that will bring that bishop into the game. So that looks like a reasonable plan, which Niemann stops with knight e4, hitting the outpost and exchanging pieces. And that introduces the possibility, perhaps, of castling queenside. f3 pushes that knight from the outpost, and Niemann exchanges, and he decides to castle queenside. You don't need to do this, but, well, why not? Niemann is looking clearly for a double-edged position, and, well, that's with kings on opposite wings. That's what you've got here. And it's nice also that the rook is opposite the queen. e4, so Kramnik can be reasonably happy because he's managed to build the centre. Although that bishop isn't wonderful. Of course, there's no need for black to take this because that will improve white's pieces. So it's best just to nudge back. And the bishop is pretty reasonable there. Knight d3. Yeah, I mean, I think both sides can be reasonably satisfied with the outcome of the opening. Niemann has a double-edged position, but Kramnik has the centre, and who knows, perhaps the possibility to attack on the queen side if black doesn't react. If black kind of makes a pass move here, then it's like king b8. Then you can see how, you know, a move like knight c5 or perhaps b4 is going to be very attractive, going on the attack straight away. So Niemann plays h5, and I think black has to try to stir things up here. So if you can open up the h file, great, you have counterplay. So understandably, h4 just blocks out that h pawn. And you have to ask yourself, well, where is black's counterplay here? Black has to create trouble, or, you know, white can start attacking. So e5, I think, is an excellent move. With the rook opposite the queen, then it's attractive to actually open the centre. But also you can see that pawn on g3, a little bit weak. And white's king just a little bit exposed. So it feels like this is the right way for black to go. Now, is it any good? That's the question. Do you know what? Good or bad in a blitz game, that just feels like the right move. Otherwise, you're going to be very passive. So if white takes here, for example, that would be black's dream, because then the d file opens and you can see that's a nice pin. So of course not that. So e takes d5 and now f4. So this is all very logical. Kramnik opens up the bishop's diagonal and that looks pretty good, but black does have a move to save himself, and that's e4. So saving that pawn, blocking out the bishop. But this looks quite attractive for white. You know, I like it. You know, this is a nice pawn chain. I think, you know, if white plays a move like this, black is going to have to play f5. So this bishop doesn't look great. The king side is closed. I prefer white here. This looks good. You know, maybe you just go b4 and start attacking. You know, this knight is going to end up, I'm not quite sure where, but the knight will have to move at some point. But then, you know, it might be nice for white to attack on the queen side. But Kramnik plays another move, which, again, after some thought, f5. So I think he wants to use these squares here. Now, it's an interesting sort of temporary pawn sacrifice, because it does give white access to these squares. So it's a very positional way of playing. So the rook comes across and pins this one. Black is a pawn up, but white's pieces look very good. The bishop drops back and now knight f4. That's what Kramnik was about. He's got rid of that pawn, but the knight finds a very good square. And, well, I don't think the rook can last on the fifth rank. So it goes back, and knight takes h5. So Kramnik has regained the pawn, and it looks to me as though white is better here. Why? Because that looks like a very nice pawn chain. It's hard for black to disturb that, and white's pieces look very well coordinated. And, you know, I think black has this pawn majority, but, you know, these squares are very well covered. So Kramnik looking good at the moment. f5, yep, well, that pawn is going to need protection, but now that bishop doesn't look good. So Niemann with black looks, to my eyes, to be in trouble. Queen g5 looks very attractive. If the queens are exchanged, then again, I think white has a positional advantage. g6. It's not a great bishop, although it can come back here. And now it's surprising that Kramnik didn't exchange. and go into this endgame. Now, perhaps he felt that, you know, his advantage wasn't so great in this position. It's true that once black reorganises and gets in rook g8 and g5, then black is certainly fighting back. I still prefer white there. This knight looks like a beautiful piece, and you know, this is a mobile majority. You know, perhaps the king will come out here. That would be a safe way to play for white. But knight f6, now that looks really risky. And Niemann plays what looks to be quite a natural move, rook f8. And Kramnik takes on h7. The Kramnik, well, this is a blitz game. You're not going to see a move like this. Kramnik had a very interesting possibility here, and that's to play bishop takes pawn. Because after this is taken, then basically black's pieces, I mean, that bishop just looked terrible. And, you know, white has tremendous compensation. In fact, black is okay here. Here's the trick. If queen takes, I mean, at first you just think, well, black is a piece up here, but actually there's a trick, and that's to take here. Now, this queen needs the support of the rook, but there's rook check. That's the trick. So you win the queen, and, well, with rook, knight and bishop against the queen, it's a rough balance. It's very hard to say who's better there. Maybe it's just, you know, yeah, there's some kind of balance, but that could go either way. So bishop to e4, I mean, you're not going to have time to calculate those kind of tactics in a game. But that was the way to go. But, well, at least in a blitz game anyway. Knight takes. Kramnik goes for this, but that solves a problem. Once that bishop is gone, then black's position looks a lot more healthy. Now, Kramnik pushed here. This knight was going to come around anyway to expel the queen. And once that queen moves, then black is going to have the chance to break things open. So queen came back, attacking this pawn, king b8, c4. Now, no doubt Kramnik felt that in pushing these pawns, he was going to get a very nice attack. But it's extraordinary that actually black is doing very well here. It's this knight is key to the position. If white pushes, then knight e5, and that knight finds itself on a beautiful square. It could be an octopus on d3. It looks very much like an octopus there, which means that, well, it's going to be difficult for white to attack. Kramnik played queen f4. No doubt he was concerned about this incoming octopus. Queen g7. Good move from Niemann. White's king is actually in trouble here, because that queen is looking down the diagonal, and the king is quite exposed. You know, is it going to find safety on the h file? Not really, if there's g5 coming. And the queen also supports the knight coming to e5. So this is actually looking pretty dodgy for white now. Kramnik played c5. Queen d4. That wins a pawn. Check. Simple double attack. But already white's position was really dubious. You know, if instead, let's say b3, that knight, the octopus threatened, and that's deadly. So c5, and this loses the pawn. So once one of this pawn duo has been broken, then it's, well, impossible for white to find counterplay. And this is just looking great for black. Again, this knight threatens to come in. Here it goes. Kramnik trying hard, pushing pawns, but, well, it's interesting. Well, at the moment, the octopus isn't possible because of a pin, but in any case, it's going to g4. And now it's time to break things open. g5. That's very uncomfortable for the king. So now the h-file is open. In fact, it was possible to play bishop takes e4 here, because if pawn takes, then that's checkmate. But in fact, black's attack is still very, very strong. But Kramnik went b6. He wants to open up the king, all very understandable, but Niemann isn't distracted. You know, if you start getting involved with things here, you never know, that could somehow flip round. But he just plays queen h5. He's calculated, in fact, his king is perfectly safe here. I mean, it can be checked again, but it'll just run into the corner. Mate threatened. Check. Okay, over to you. Time for me to have a drink. Time for you to have a think. Black to play. What do you do? f4. Break open the king, of course. A check. Well, it's completely over now with this rook entering the game. Kramnik gives up a rook. There's a little bit of a distraction, but, well, Niemann persists. He's now a rook up, and that is a winning move. If queen takes, then you can pin. And no doubt, mate is following shortly. Well, that was the way things turned around there, beautifully played by Niemann. And in the second game, well, that was interesting, actually. Niemann was holding things very steadily with white in this game, with an equal rook and pawn endgame. But at this point, after rook takes g3 check, Niemann with white, he could just go king d2 and he's safe. Instead, he went king f4. This was the only blip in the game. No doubt this was happening very quickly. But in fact, here, Kramnik missed a win. He could play king c5. Because if this, then that's a winning king pawn endgame. And after this, here is the trick. Rook check. And you build a bridge. And that's going to win for black. But instead, Kramnik overlooked it. And this should just be a draw. But in his haste, Kramnik actually blundered and lost this position. So here, of course, if black just gives up the rook and plays here, it's going to be a draw. But instead, Kramnik played h4 and rook takes pawn. That was the end of that. If that's taken, then you get a queen. And after this, well, Kramnik resigned because after this, or perhaps he lost on time, I'm not sure. Because after this, that's absolutely game over. So this, and the rook goes behind the pawn and wins. So there you go. It looks to me like Niemann is living rent-free in Kramnik's head at the moment. 2-0, convincing victory for Niemann. And, well, frankly, I'm not surprised that Niemann beat him, because Kramnik just doesn't practice as much as these kids who are playing online all the time. You know, it's very difficult for the older generation, and that looked well-deserved to me. Hope you enjoyed that. You might have noticed in the background, there you go. Where is it? It's over there. It's over there. There it is. I'll tell you more about that soon in a coming video. There's a little award on the wall. Thanks for watching.